seating. It's only at Larimer Furniture in downtown Wakarusa, and it's only for a limited time.
The first band of the killer tornadoes slashed across the 5-county northern Indiana area shortly before nightfall.
I remember looking at the sky, and it was a very eerie green color.
Real eerie, still, and quiet, and then all of a sudden everything just went to pieces.
And it just flattened everything.
And I didn't see anything. Everything was just gone.
The size of the storm was astronomical. It's a miracle that any of us survived.
Mention Palm Sunday, and people around Michiana can probably tell you where they were and what they were doing when a tornado outbreak devastated the area in 1965.
This was one of the hardest hit areas, the Midway Mobile Home Park in Dunlap, the site of so many homes leveled by those twisters.
It was just one of the places the tornadoes touched down, leaving a trail of death and destruction.
Hear it coming, and it sounded like a bunch of jet bombers flying over, lots of them, and then there was dirt flying all around us, and it felt like something was drawing the breath right out of my body.
We see a car in the basement. Did that come flying in after you were down there?
Yes, it come in. I took the house off, and then the car come in down in the basement. We was between the car and the stairway landing.
271 people died in the Palm Sunday tornadoes, 82 of them from counties in our area.
Now, 50 years later, the sights and the sounds are still vivid for those who survived.
And so we all just kind of huddled together, and then it was just like this sound of the freight train is exactly what it sounded like, and just a big roar.
And I looked out through those 2 picture windows, and I could see that black funnel coming across Coons Lake, and as soon as it hit the water, it immediately turned white.
Dead silence. It was just like death. There was nothing. No birds, no people, nothing.
I saw my dog, who was under our porch at the time, and she had survived, and everything else was pure desolation.
Over the next half hour, we'll hear survivor stories, lives changed forever by the sheer force of the wind, and track the path of the multiple tornadoes that roared across our area.
We will also look at the effort to preserve the images and the stories from that fateful day and the outpouring of support that followed. See how that day is still impacting us 50 years later.
Perhaps the most iconic image of the Palm Sunday tornadoes was taken right here on US 33, near where the County Road 17 overpass is today. The picture of the twin tornadoes that caused so much destruction.
The late Paul Huffman of the Elkhart Truth is the one who took that picture that made him so famous. His wife Betty was with him when he shot it, and she told me she had no idea what was headed their way.
When I saw it, I said, "Oh, look at that smoke over there." And he turned around and looked. He had been through a couple before, and so he turned and looked. And he said, "That's a tornado." It was real. It was all dust, dirt, and it was just enormous. It was sweeping the ground, and
you thought it was smoke.
I thought it was smoke. It was thick, and it was gray, and it was
dark.
Really horrifying. But I just sat in the car and I watched as it come down the railroad tracks. And every time it hit a telephone pole, their balls of fire would fly out. And I kept thinking, now he told me to get in the ditch, and I thought, no, I don't have to yet. But then when it came down, oh, it was quite a ways in front of me. It turned and went over across the tracks. He was standing out in front of the car, taking pictures. And then he kept moving, going up closer, trying to get the best shots he could. And I was yelling at him to get in the car. I thought he was going to blow away. I mean, you know, it was so windy. His clothes were just standing out. And I said, you know, get in here. You know, he said, just a minute. He always had to get that last picture.
At the time, did you even know? I mean, I don't think he knew that there were 2 tornadoes.
No,
did you?
We didn't at all, because when we first spotted it, it was one big tornado. It was just, I can't tell you how vast it was. And so we didn't know until he developed the picture when he went back to the Truth that evening, that he knew that he caught the split.
I mean, it was so many years ago, but you have a very vivid memory of seeing him standing there snapping those
very
pictures.
vivid. Matter of fact, some nights after that, I think, oh my, I think we're just so glad that we're so thankful that we're alive. Because if it come just a little bit closer, we may not have made it through.
Mrs. Huffman says to this day, what she experienced on Palm Sunday 1965 makes her more frightened when she hears there's a possibility of a tornado.
Well, news coverage of that day actually started well before the tornadoes hit. All afternoon, TV and radio stations were talking about the storm system that had already caused damage in other areas. And WSBT 22 News was covering every step of it after the twisters started touching down here.
The first band of the killer tornado slashed across the 5-county northern Indiana area shortly before nightfall, as we mentioned earlier. The second cluster swirled out of the sky an hour later and ripped across central Indiana. At last count, as we have it from around the state, 91 persons were killed in the state of Indiana by the twisters which hit the state earlier tonight.
Retired South Bend Tribune reporter Jack Colwell was a young reporter in 1965.
Now, he was in his 20s working in South Bend when the newsroom started getting calls about tornado damage. He told me he headed out to see what was happening.
What, in your memory, when you think back to that day and coming upon the scene and seeing that, I mean, what do you remember from that?
I thought, first of all, it was like the pictures of the atomic bombs in Japan at the close of World War II. Just total devastation. You had roofs not just blown off, but just torn apart. Shingles just flying all over the place. It was just amazing devastation.
What was your emotion like at that time? Because here you are, a young reporter. You're sent there to cover the story.
Right. But
the devastation there, it had to be, I mean, emotionally, how did you handle it?
Oh, yeah, because you knew that people had died in that debris. Hundreds altogether in northern Indiana. So, yeah, it was a terrible scene. Emotional.
When you arrived, and what are you seeing? Take us back to that day.
People were just kind of wandering around, stunned. In some cases, looking for things that might have been blown out of their homes. They were wondering about their relatives. Did they survive? Was a child or parent or uncle somebody killed in this? And of course, I was trying to get information. You had to go up and ask people where they were, what they saw, if they were aware of anyone who was injured, killed. And that was tough too, because, as I said, they were kind of stunned, they were emotional, but you had to go and try to get some information.
The damage and loss of life in Elkhart County was the focus after the Palm Sunday tornadoes, but the storms actually spawned tornadoes all across northern Indiana. The first to touch down was here in Coons Lake in Stark County, where over 100 cottages were damaged or destroyed. And this slab of concrete is where a boathouse stood until that day 50 years ago.
And I looked out through those two picture windows and I could see that black funnel coming across Coons Lake, and as soon as it hit the water, it immediately turned white. And when it hit all the water, you could see all the debris that was in it because it was white and the debris was black.
Just a lot of debris everywhere. Trees down, branches all over everywhere. People crying, you know, standing outside crying. It was just a mess. And it was shocking, you know, for an 18-year-old, it was in a way exciting, but at the same time, it was kind of devastating. As I recall, there was just a slit to get into the basement, and I was the skinniest guy there at 18 years old at the time. So they lowered me into this basement with a flashlight because it was almost dark at the time. I was just scared to death that I would find a body down there.
And then it went into that bank over there, and it took out all those homes along that bank, and then this photo has got The tornado, after it's taken those homes out, it's on the other side of that tree line right now.
50 years later, it's hard to see any remnants of the tornado's path. After the cluster started its path in Porter and LaPorte counties, the second set began at Coons Lake. It roared into Marshall and St. Joseph counties, damaging the then under construction LaVille High School. Another cluster spawned the now infamous Twin Twister that hit in Elkhart County. The storms then made their way northeast through LaGrange and Steuben counties and then into Michigan.
It's not unusual to see them cluster and form and then track. When you start getting into the larger, as the storms become larger and more intense, those path lengths become longer. They're able to sustain the life cycle of that storm longer, and they're able to get wider and more intense.
A total of 6 tornadoes touched down in our area, 47 across the Midwest.
One of the most incredible stories of survival happened here at the intersection of US 20 and State Road 15 in Elkhart County. Becky Lawrence was just 5 years old at the time, enjoying a spring afternoon with her family. Little did she know that by the end of the day, she would lose a brother, a sister, an uncle, and 3 cousins. When the tornado hit her house, she was carried here, nearly a quarter of a mile away.
There was a door, and my dad looked out that door, the window, and he hollered, "Everybody lay down, there's a tornado." We didn't know what that was. We didn't have a clue. And my uncle, I think, ran towards the bedrooms, and so we all ran towards the bedrooms. And the first bedroom was my bedroom and Janie's room. 5 people made it into that bedroom. But I tripped on the step, and my dad had a hold of my leg, and he was, you know, he had my mom and my little brother and my cousin Richard. He had all of them, and my dad was big. He was like 6'3", 300 pound. He was a big man. He had them all, you know, they're not going anywhere. They're on that concrete, and he's got them. And he had my leg. And I remember the house started to shake, and I could feel it, you know, like coming up in the air. And I don't know what I thought, but the next thing I remembered was when I woke up, I was falling out of the sky, and I saw the road, and I told him at the hospital. I told him at the hospital that when I saw the road, I had a heart attack. But, because I knew I was going to hit the road, you know. I figured I'd be dead, but I landed in the ditch right beside the road. And when I woke up again, I was laying in the grass, and it just, I thought the world ended. You know, I mean, I thought the world ended. I had no idea what had happened.
As rescue crews were picking through the debris at Midway Trailer Court, another tornado appeared on the horizon and aimed its destruction towards Sunnyside subdivision in Dunlap. May Swafford and her sister-in-law Karen Sharkey were here where their family home once stood. They saw the tornado coming toward them and they ran for cover.
When we saw it, it was like a curtain coming, and it was coming up the road. And May had asked, she said, "Dad, that's a funny looking cloud." He said, "That's a tornado coming. And get the kids and get to the basement." So they did. They all went downstairs, and I thought, I've got to go upstairs and get the pillows because this tornado is going to hit at least half of the house. So I ran up, got the pillows, took them and threw them downstairs and told them be sure to put a pillow on top of their head.
It was so fast moving. It just seemed like it took just minutes. And when it really hit, then all I could hear was wood splintering and glass breaking. And it was just over in a minute's time, I think. And when it was over, we looked up and we could see the sky. And that was the only part of the flooring from the 2-story home that was open for us to crawl out. And then it seems like
I must have been in a daze, because when we got out, I just didn't see anybody around. And of course, none of us did.
That's embedded in your memory, isn't it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And thinking, you know, minutes ago, here you are in this wonderful house and wonderful neighborhood, then you walk out and it's all destroyed.
Yes, all I could think of was we were the only ones alive, because I had seen all of us, and there was nobody out of their house.
In the aftermath of the storm, President Lyndon Johnson made a trip here to the Sunnyside neighborhood to survey the damage. You can see where homes used to stand.
He was mobbed by crowds wherever he went, and a WSBT 22 news reporter asked him about it live at the airport.
Mr. President, may we have a few words? May we have a few words for live television, Mr. President? Can you give us your impressions of what you saw in Elkhart County today, sir? Pardon me, sir, at the end of our mic line. Can we have just a few words, please?
Well, it's very sad, and we're very sorry that all this tragedy has been visited upon these wonderful people in this good state. We're sorry what's happened, and we want to do anything we can to be helpful.
Does this indicate federal aid will be coming, sir? It does. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
There are many stories about just what the power of tornadic winds can do. In Dunlap, a car part was wedged into a tree 50 years ago, and it remains there today. And there's other evidence of strange debris from the Palm Sunday tornadoes and other tornadoes across the country.
It's when you start seeing things like pencils driven into a piece of wood, straw driven into siding, or pieces of metal twisted, wrapped, and distorted as it gets wrapped around trees, you start really understanding there's a lot of force behind these.
That force can do some pretty incredible things. This spoon was found wrapped around a tree branch in the Sunnyside neighborhood after the Palm Sunday tornadoes. And this bicycle was wrapped around a clothesline post in that same neighborhood.
How this all happens is in that instantaneous moment when the wind picks up that target or that debris, turns it into a projectile, it meets another object, and all kinds of crazy things happen.
While these images from the local tornado look impressive, these winds can turn everyday items into deadly weapons.
We're looking at thunderstorm winds, generally severe thunderstorm, 58 miles per hour. We've had instances where thunderstorms have produced 90 to 100 mile an hour winds. And when you get into tornadoes, the rapid spin and churning of that air, 100, 200 miles per hour, little things like a straw, little things like a pencil become deadly, forceful projectiles. But could you imagine what would happen if it were you, the human body, being impaled by some of these? It's a very tragic thing to be thinking about those possibilities of being involved in those impacts from those projectiles.
In the years since that Palm Sunday, there have been many tributes. One of them is right here, where Debbie Waters' childhood home once stood. She lost her brother and created this memorial for all of the victims and those who were left behind.
As far as I know, 271 people died that day across 6 states. 28 people in my neighborhood alone died, my brother being one of them. What better thing could we do than make something in memory of those people who lost their lives? That's first and foremost. Secondly would be the survivors. We were talking about survivor's guilt. There's so many people, and we're talking 50 years now. We're on the 50-year mark. So many people that still hurt from that day. They've got wounds that are still deep. Some of my family is like that. It's for them too. The day that we opened the memorial for the first time, someone prayed, and I believe it to be true, is whoever steps foot on this ground will have peace and closure. And so it's definitely for the survivors. And it's also for my brother, one who suffers from survivor's guilt. Many times you wonder, has this done any good for anyone? Or is it just something everyone's looking at? I mean, has it helped anyone? And 5 years ago, at the last memorial service, this lady came up to me afterwards and she was crying so hard. I couldn't understand what she was telling me. But I got the fact that she lost 6 people in her family. She said it was because of the memorial and the things that you said about survivor's guilt that has helped me tell my story. So yeah, it's doing some good somewhere. And we may never know everything, but that's okay.
As the years pass by, there's been great effort to preserve the stories and images of that terrible Sunday in 1965. The Elkhart County Historical Museum has done just that. The biggest highlight, the aftermath and community response.
There's a lot of people that want to remember what happened that day and not forget the people that we lost and the destruction that happened that day. So we're hoping the exhibit kind of does that in a more kind of vital, dynamic kind of way. They're going to be able to see those images and maybe recall the memories.
The new exhibit documents the day the tornadoes hit and the days of the recovery. Many of the photos in the exhibit were taken by local media and emergency responders. And while they capture the severity of the aftermath, curator Patrick McGuire hopes they tell the personal stories of how the community responded as well.
It was amazing. Like, for example, the Red Cross, when the storm hit on Sunday, by Wednesday, they were feeding 600 people a day since Sunday, all on food that was donated from the community. So we really want to highlight that area too, because people always remember the destruction, but they don't really remember what happened and, afterwards, which is really where the real story is.
Those stories are told through the eyes of people like the Red Cross coordinator who came from out of town.
She had been through 3 floods, a hotel fire, numerous things, and she said that she had never seen a response like she had seen here in Elkhart County.
The aftermath from the storms involved more than just the cleanup. For people like Patricia McKinley, it was coming to grips with the realization that lives were lost. Her father sounded the alarm for her family as one of the tornadoes narrowly missed her family's home.
He said, everybody lay down. Where you're at, lay down. Huddle together. And that's what we all did. And then I remember hearing him tell my uncle, this is going to be a bad one. This is going to be a bad one. And so we all just kind of huddled together, and then it was just like this sound of the freight train is exactly what it sounded like, and just a big roar. And it was over almost as fast as it came, and we didn't hear it. So then Dad got up, and him and my uncle went out to see if there was any kind of damage or anything.
When did you first realize this is bad, people have died, this is very serious? When did it sink in for you?
I think when we went back to school, and I can't quite remember how many days we were out of school, but it seemed like a week and a half, something like that. And it was at that point when you didn't see kids that you went to school with. And they had not come back to school. So, it was kind of putting 2 and 2 together and trying to figure it out. I remember Dad talking to Mom every night when he would come home late, and he would say, they thought they were making progress, but then it's like then they would get shot back further than where they were before. But I never understood, and he never explained.
There's no arguing the Palm Sunday tornado outbreak was massive. One result of the devastation was changes made to the way people were warned about storms. Tornado sirens are now common to alert people outside. And the National Weather Service also had changes too. Among them, a radar facility was installed to fill in the gap that existed before.
There was no radar in South Bend at that time. They were just a local forecast office, and it wasn't just Chicago. They could talk to Fort Wayne or even Detroit, who had radars. And they would just try and see who had the best view of what was going on, get the information relayed, and then try and get a local warning out to the local area based on what they were hearing over the phone.
And that's just part of the reason our area saw a blanket warning for tornadoes on Palm Sunday, 1965. Meteorologist Sam Lashley from the National Weather Service says the devastation we experienced taught scientists some valuable lessons.
But because of that event and what we've learned, hundreds and thousands of lives have been saved by things we implemented since that event. Back then we didn't have any education of the public. So one thing that came out of that was a recommendation that we do training, severe weather awareness weeks that we've started from that. So the people now understand a watch, a warning, where to go in a tornado. A lot of people had no idea what to do. They didn't even realize a basement was a safe place to go.
Lashley says the Palm Sunday outbreak was the pinnacle of the profession for meteorologists. It changed how we do things and improved technology. The local Doppler radar and all the technology we now use makes forecasting an event more precise. The Fujita or F scale measures tornado winds also resulted from surveys of the damage.
He took aerial surveys, flew a lot of miles, looked at the damage from the air, and then it took him 5 years to publish this research and all this information that he learned. And then finally in 1971 is when he actually came out with the F scale, which we still use today. It's been enhanced, so we have more information from wind tunnel testing. But it all began with the Palm Sunday event.
It is so unfortunate that so many lives were lost because of this tragedy, but there was a lot of good to come from this. It took a while for the technology to catch up, but as Carrie mentioned, it has improved.
It has. We don't ever want to see something like this happen again. Now, is it possible that a big outbreak like this could happen again? Well, yes.
It's our job, though, to do the very best we can to keep you safe. We're lucky. We're so lucky to have the tools that we have today. Mobile news and weather apps, and the ability to communicate with you around the clock. That did not exist back in 1965.
Yeah, it didn't. And for these improvements, we're fortunate. Now, we leave you with a look at some of the iconic images from 1965. Thank you for watching.
If you haven't been able to find a